Good day. I'm your host, Jonathan Bay, and this is the Moorish Directory's Moor Talk. What we're going to do today is I'm going to bring you into a conversation. I just received a phone call from a young brother who has called a couple times this week. He came across the Moorish Directory, and we've been having some very interesting and stimulating conversations out of that. And the reason I had decided to do this particular episode, episode 20 of Moor Talk, was that I've been receiving recently a lot of phone calls regarding the Moorish Councilor courts and wanted to address that issue. And briefly in our conversation today, began to speak about that, and I paused our conversation and asked the young brother if I might be able to give him a call back to afford you an opportunity just to listen in on the conversation so that you can also be afforded an opportunity to hear the exchange, as well as this young brother's articulation with respect to his understandings of some of the material that you will find on the Moorish Directory, as well as give him an opportunity to expand or expound upon those things that he himself had already previously known of, might have a familiarization with, or even an adept understanding of, that has been confirmed through his viewing information on the directory as well as reading the well-researched empirical evidence of the material expressed there. So in any event, let me go ahead and dial him up, and we'll begin that conversation.
Hello?
Good day, brother. Peace and love. This is Jonathan Bay with the MoorisHDirectory.com, giving you that phone call that I had mentioned I'd be calling you on to allow our viewers of Moor Talk to kind of eavesdrop and listen in on our dialogue and conversation today that you were so willing to afford me an opportunity to capture. I appreciate it, and thank you very much with gratitude for that. I'd like to open up by asking if you'd first just go ahead and identify yourself, and also, if you could, just give a brief synopsis as to when and how you came across the Moorish Directory, and what over the course of this week it has provided to you in whichever way you'd like to express. Floor is yours.
Islam. First and foremost, my name is Melvin Goodwin Bay. I'm from the territory, the land of New Hampshire County, Republic of North Carolina. And I was browsing, looking for assistance in the process of properly sealing and, lawfully noticing my judicial notice of proclamation and name correction documentation.
Okay.
And so that search took me to RV Bay Publications website.
Great site. Absolutely.
And, great site. And so in the process of that website, I was reading through the material, and so I said to myself, I need somebody live to talk to, and then, I can maybe really get the real help that I'm looking for. And so I came across a number on the RV publication site, and I called that number. And I called that number, and a brother by the name of Jonathan Bay answered the phone.
Okay.
And me and that brother, we started speaking, and that brother started explaining how the site, how he streamlined the process, of navigating the site, to where it's a lot of very, very valuable information made available to the public, in a very organized organized way.
Now, just for the understanding of those that are listening in, when you called and we began our conversation regarding the site and many other things over the course of time, when was that? When we began our first conversation.
It was last week. It was the end of last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Personally, I find that vehicle very instrumental. You know, again, like I said, it's priceless. It's a wealth of priceless gems that the Prophet left for us that are manifested through Brother Jonathan Bey. And, you know, the particular methods and ways that he chooses to express his creative self through that vehicle.
Okay, now let's look at a couple things with specificity. There's a particular item that is on a page, and for those that are not aware, all of the pages have tabs on the top area, with the exception of the home page. And when you go to that, it'll give you some of the highlights that one can navigate to access information. It's not all of the pages, but it's some of the highlights that will allow you into the system. And there is one particular page that is called Very Important Moorish PSA, Public Service Announcement, which I understand you've had opportunity to take a look at, that speaks toward the reanimation of Moorish governance and the manner in which that is to be effectuated, essentially a blueprint that goes along with the Moorish rules of order, which are also available by way of the site. And if you could maybe just give me your impression as to what it was that was the takeaway with respect to that particular video clip as it relates to Moorish governance, divine order, and whatever else you may wish to articulate that you took away from that particular public service announcement.
I recognized the consciousness of, the one who wrote it. And his consciousness of the need for the Moorish divine and national movement of the world, right? To be an organized unit, body.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this organized body will have organized sub-departments or ministries.
Mm-hmm.
But the over fragmentation is what I'm gonna say. It can't be too many fractions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or factions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we don't want the arbitrariness to come into play.
Okay, now pause right there. When we're talking about a unified group that comes into fruition by way of, as it speaks there, and I'm going to play the clip for them to give them an opportunity to actually hear the words, the verbiage articulated, so they'll understand what we're speaking of. I've communicated with and received communications from a significant portion of our proactive evolutionary Moorish American community, expressing very reasonable concern regarding our state of unity and progress, or lack thereof, over the past 60-odd years. Equally expressed has been a growing anxiety, a natural frustration, purposely constructed by a growing voice of dissension from those who have clearly, by way of whatever organized adversarial force or self-serving purpose, made it their mission to unabashedly distort the prophetic words and uniting vision of the individual who has set into motion our movement's unwavering course and goal of uplifting fallen humanity, as we again rise to take our rightful place among the affairs of men. While the patience of our community remains steadfast and confirmed, this statement is to serve as a measure of assurity to all that your energies, efforts, activities, and support are by no means in vain. Coming soon will be further word with greater specificity as to the progressive details of not only what many have been waiting to hear, but have individually and collectively been working very hard and diligently to secure. And although it is not difficult to, in one's solitude, feel disconnected, isolated, or unsure of what progress has transpired and at what pace the mechanisms of positive evolution may be manifesting, you may be assured dormancy is by no means a factor, and that hard work is being accomplished to ensure not only that all true Asiatics, North, Central, South, East, and West, the de jure Aboriginal and Indigenous Americans, will, in very short order, without doubt nor brand, know the truth of their nationality, hereditament, and full scope, ipta show of their birthrights and capacities. And there have been operative think tanks, progressive intellectual consortiums of evolutionary active Moors, whose primary mission is determining, prioritizing, and implementing the required catalysts to best develop and effectuate a trifold procedure for establishing the following initial primary objectives: establishing the first Aboriginal and Indigenous Moorish American Reunification Conference Working Oversight Committee to establish a municipal corporate shield to operate and serve as a central body and vehicle responsible for and capable of establishing an affairs coordination plan, an ACP, required to manifest a realistic, orderly, substantially meaningful, and productive unification conference agenda, and the required cosmological infrastructure for effectuating same. Pursuant to the ACP directives, under proper protocols of international recognized parliamentary procedure, called to order a body for the establishing of regional committees to elect representatives, delegates, possessing or resembling a similar acute acumen as referenced in the call to action. An action made with an emphasized recognition of our current application era. The time is undoubtedly now that certain bold initiatives must, without failure or delay, be called into being forthwith to initiate and implement the required constructions of a viable, active convention of evolutionary faithful Moors for the awe-inspiring, solemn purpose of articulating and hearing with tolerance all reasonable national concerns, to be accompanied by respectful discussions and thoughtful deliberation on the important merits of all tabled, well-reasoned issues and affairs, united as one, with an unwavering singular pursuit of sound and practical measured means in which to fashion and actuate in a timely yet thorough manner an adequately provisioned quorum of specifically qualified, suitably aged, responsible electors of various stature, yet common by soundness of mind, each possessing an astute acumen appropriately peculiar to Moorish affairs, with well-suited honest willingness, unique abilities, and fortitude to succeed in the truly noble task of bringing to fruition a refreshing of our body politic, to effectively address and accommodate with admirable fairness the various needs, desires, and revitalization requirements of our indigenous populace, collective and individual well-being, in harmony with our divine universal prophet's intent and lovingly established moral directive to be instrumental in the critically imperative task of uplifting fallen humanity, guided by the spiritually transcendent principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, out of which will be established a base comprehensive unity council to serve as the developing force responsible for instituting a singular vehicle to serve as the means and mechanism for bringing to fruition the institution of our legal and lawfully effective administrative governing bodies, national delegation charged with the universally accepted authoritative responsibility of reanimating or developing anew by 2018 the Moorish Confederation's Earth Republic Constitution for reestablishing humanity's equitable governing framework harmonious with the original Republic's Constitution and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, as well as commissioned emissaries whose responsibilities will include developing these positive relationships with the United States and others shaping global human affairs. It speaks very importantly toward a responsibility and there being a need for consensus, which is rooted in the preface that a reanimation of the government, Moorish governance, must be for the people, by the people, rooted within a true consensus, north, south, east, west, and central, by way of duly elected, all the way from the very local level, afforded opportunity to have their debate, to table their ideas, to discuss the merits, wealth, and value of their concepts, to bring into order, and order is important because, again, with physics, we're talking about the lowering of entropy and the distancing ourselves from chaos in a manner in which records are taken, establishing our progress with each meeting, be it the electing of officials on the local level, such as secretaries to take minutes and chairpersons to keep order, and these delegates that are so important to be elected from the common population who are of sound mind and appropriate age to come together and agree upon whom it is that they are going to be having represent them in the best fashion for whatever limited period of time, and that a group cannot simply walk up and introduce themselves, hello, we're so-and-so and we are your leaders, okay, and begin dictating that which we would be entrusting in them to be governing over. So can you elaborate upon any further what your impressions are with respect to that cosmic and divine nature as it applies to perhaps law and what you believe law is?
Well, the public service announcement work, that work is so important. I feel that work is so important because, if we do the research, because first I like to find credibility for things in the modern world, in the customs and the cultures of my ancient forefathers first, right? And then use that as a guide. So now when we research our ancient foremothers and our forefathers, the foundations of any government must start with the community. The community is a collective of families. So the community is an extension of Moorish family. So the Moorish community must convene as regularly as possible to attend to Moorish business. Now, the convening phase is so very important because it is the phase where all the delegates of the community, all of the people or the elected representatives who are chosen by the community to represent them in affairs political.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
So the convening phase is so very important, and that speaks to we as Moors have to come together from the leadership on down, and we have to start intercoursing with one another about what is best for us as a people, not what's best for my image, for my personality, or what my reputation is as an office holder of the Moorish divine and national movement of the world. Those things have no place in this convening. They will not be issues on the table. But the convening must take place. Our Moorish leaders must start talking to each other. The issues, the resentments from the past must be put to the side. They must be talked about, addressed, and then laid to rest in the spirit and for the sake of the Prophet's work. That's point blank, period. Point blank, period. Principles must start to be placed above personalities, because this is the problem.
Now, when you're speaking of in the spirit of the word, that brings us to law and helping one to understand what that three-letter word actually means and the nature of that divinity as it relates to the human experience.
Well, first and foremost, when we talk about law, we're talking about length, angles, and width. On the plane of things made manifest. Spiritually, we are talking about those spiritual energies or principles, order. And this order can be seen all throughout the the universe.
Order, cause, and effect, correct?
That's right. Now, if one of the primary universal laws is motion, then the second must be order, because there needs to be some order set to that motion, or else there will be destruction and catastrophe. Now, that order we term divine law. And these divine laws or divine principles governs things spiritual. From these divine spiritual laws unfolds natural laws for the human race. Now,
So you're talking methodologies.
excuse me?
You're speaking methodologies. You're talking
Yes.
again, we're talking about how, in fact, that mastermind was so astute in leaving the breadcrumbs by placing the term science in the center of the naming of the temple in which he established, because there's something intrinsically important in understanding the import of science and logic and order. Correct?
That's right. And the Moorish student of the Prophet Noble Jabali and a sincere servant of the great God Allah is equipped with tools in order to approach the study of law scientifically, the study of politics scientifically, the study of finance scientifically. Because the Prophet ensured that we understand that it is about the science of things. And when your knowledge is based in the science of things, then you can't get caught out here in the public with all the miseducation and the propaganda that's in circulation. But anyway, right? So the Moorish American, by his very nature, is a law man, is a scientist. He must be. Because the Prophet instructed us to know ourselves. So in order to know yourself, then you must become conscious of the science of yourself.
Okay, now when you say conscious, tell me what you are referring to, because we hear that term thrown around a great deal.
Well,
And consciousness. And where does that lie with respect to the base formula of reality with respect to consciousness itself? And what is that? What do you mean when you say conscious?
well,
What is that perception?
Prophet Noble, and I have a question there. I 101 question there. There was a question posed, and the question was, how did the Prophet begin to uplift the Moorish Americans? And the answer to that question is by teaching them to be themselves. So when you hear me use the term consciousness, I mean the oneness, the beingness of yourself. And that was the tool that the Prophet used to begin by uplifting us, was teaching us to be ourselves. And what is yourself? Spirit man. So now, these same divine and spiritual principles that the universal order are founded upon are the same divine principles and the same universal order that the family must operate according to, the community must operate according to, and the government must operate according to, society as a whole. So, we take it back to this very, very, very fundamental phase, as you stated, the convening phase. Our Moorish leaders must start to convene an intercourse with one another for the sake of the work that needs to be done and for the sake of the culmination or the culminating or the full emergence of the Moorish divine and national movement of the world as an organized government on this land.
Now, the Arrowhead project, which was the establishing of a small yet central coalition of luminaries who would in fact, in their prominence within the social construct of our civic society, the Moorish experience, our community, were being provided a device, mechanism, and vehicle entitled the Arrowhead Project in order to begin the process of the heavy lifting and communications between one another and bridging those gaps of dissension between the groups, the bickering or what have you, that would allow for these villages, towns, the local areas in whatever type of geographical area it might be, to begin the process, a call to action, and that these individuals, well respected in our community, would come forward to show a unified front, a general consensus within themselves, a demonstration by need and deed of unity, that in fact they had within them the same ability to come together collectively as a collective in a similar manner as did those citizen farmers who our forebears brought together, locked up in a room for all intent and purpose, until they came to an agreement with respect to the Constitution that we wrote for them, which constituted their portion of the union between their people and their relationship with their Moorish landlords, and what constituted the civilization which they would be establishing through their republic, not democracy. And would be a showing that we too have the ability to roll up our sleeves and begin that process of effectuating a reanimation of that Moorish governance, out of which things such as Councilor courts and other administrative matters would be derived. And all of this, of course, comes first out of the subjective plane of consciousness to fruition within the objective perceived reality of this classroom that we exist in for the benefit of the greater system, the all, that series of realities we call cause and effect, the laws which govern all things which are, and have simply been fragmented or made fractal in nature so that the Creator can experience its creation through us. Now, of course, one would think logically that such an opportunity would be something that all who have professed to be looking for a unified vehicle by which the international community, because of its divinity, would have no ability to even articulate in any type of demeaning manner because of its divine nature, rooted in truth, love, peace, freedom, and justice. And what is your concept or thoughts regarding whether or not this is the time in which perhaps those that may have initially looked at the Arrowhead project and the call to action perhaps revisit to consider coming together as a consensus to begin the process of establishing these local municipal groups, which would take it then, of course, to regional groups, which, of course, then would go to a national conference out of which the process would begin. What are your thoughts?
Well, when our Moorish leaders become able to put petty differences to the side for the sake of the nation, and we start having these national clarification conversations is what I'm going to call them. Right? Because we all, as a people and as a movement, need to be clear on one thing. That it is the principles of Allah and the Prophet Noble Drew Ali that guides this movement alone. So it makes no difference who I think I am within this movement. If my thoughts and if my heart are not focused on the fact that I am a servant of the Most High Allah and a disciple and a student of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, we will always continue to get lost and get off path.
Very well said. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play for them that call to action, that very important public service message for our community, as well as the most copy of the most recent Moor Talk, What Moors Need to Know, which I believe you also had an opportunity to take a look at.
Yes.
And out of that, they will probably have an opportunity to rewind this particular Moor Talk episode 20, reevaluate the conversation, and draw for themselves whatever conclusions they may arrive at with respect to those conversations that and debates that have been ongoing regarding the Councilor Court and the manner in which these vehicles must be rooted within a structure soundly and unmistakably harnessed to the divine nature of love within the context of that frequency, that vibration, that oscillation, which defines the essence of our genius or the genes in us.
That's right.
So we're going to start somewhere near the beginning of when the Europeans came to our land in 1492. We've all been taught by our European or Eurocentric school system that an individual by the name of Christopher Columbus discovered America. However, what actually happened in 1492 was that Queen Elizabeth and King Ferdinand overthrew the Moors in Spain, then launched an exploratory mission of 3 warships, the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, to our shores in an attempt to overthrow the empire, which is located where we now call the Empire State, New York, where the Empire State Building is. Also, it was the World Trade Center, or the center of world trade. We were seafaring mariners navigating the oceans globally with trade routes which reached all corners of the globe. But let's back up a moment. Why did I say our shores? Well, the reason is, I'll explain with an example, using a saltine cracker. If you were to take a saltine cracker and break it in half, you'll find that the salt still remains on the left side as well as the right. The salt did not and would not exclusively jump over miraculously to the right nor the left side of the cracker. It would remain in place, just as before it was broken. The same thing occurred with respect to the separation of the continents and the great pandemic separation. The inhabitants of those lands would have remained also on the left and the right. They would not have exclusively, somehow, miraculously, jumped over exclusively to the African side, leaving none of those inhabitants here. In other words, we were here since the beginning of time. That's what you would call indigenous and aboriginal. We are Paleo-American. We go back to the time of dust on this land. The term African American is a misnomer created by Jesse Jackson, a term which separates you from your nationality and your legal rights as indigenous and aboriginal to this land, America. So let's take a look at the word America, or American. What is an American? The term American is a derivation. When you think of someone with a slang in their voice, American, 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 Moroccan, a Moroccan, they're actually saying a Moroccan when they're saying American. You are not African American, but in fact, a Moroccan. Indisputable proof and empirical evidence of this can be found in the National Archives in a letter from George Washington to the Emperor of Morocco, 31st of March, 1791, in which George Washington is thanking profusely the Emperor for allowing his people sanctuary on our land. And this letter is addressed to the Emperor at his palace in what we call now the Empire State, New York. The phrase or term Christ de Cologne, or Americanized Christopher Columbus, literally means Christianity colonizing. Chris de Bol, or Christ de Bol, Cologne, To clone something is to replicate it or to have something become the same as which it is or that subject is. Christopher Columbus was a literary character created by an individual by the name of Pulitzer. When he wrote the first teacher's guide, a manual that was mandatory for the public school system, the first teacher's guide was called The Discovery of America, an Outgrowth of the Conquest of the Moors by the Spaniards. Let's take a look at the word religion. Out of it we see the word legion. A legion, a vast host, multitude, or number of people or things, as in the Roman legion or foreign legion, a vast group of individuals brought together under arms for a campaign or crusade, war. A legion is a vast host or great number, multitude of people. A legion could be considered one's forebearers. It could be that vast host out of which you came. Looking at the word religion, we see re-legion. Re as in returning, realigning, reconnecting, reestablishing, a connection with your legion, or returning to the mindset of your ancient forebearers, realigning yourself, re-legioning yourself to your cultural heritage. When you're studying and learning about your culture, you are literally, biologically, remapping the neural fiber networks of your gray matter in your brain. When Noble Drew Ali said, return to the mindset of your ancient forebearers, he was not just talking metaphorically. He was also talking scientifically, biologically, physiologically. He was talking about, in a scientific manner, the remapping of your neural fiber network. Think of it like this. An old radio dial, when you turn it trying to find a station, let's say 95 on your FM dial, as you're turning that dial, there's a lot of static, more static, less static, less static, less static, until it becomes crystal clear, because you're now on frequency. Well, when you first arrived into this dimension by your own volition, by your own choice, into this learning environment, this avatarial cocoon, this perception of reality, you came with your own unique frequency, vibration. Every cell in your body vibrates at a particular resonant frequency which is unique to yourself and yourself alone. There are no two frequencies in any human which are identical. Just like a radio dial, 95.5. Well, with us, let's say 95.5.00070767. No one else has that number, except for you. There may be some that are close or similar, but no two are alike. There is only one you. There was only one resonating frequency, which is yours. And originally it was harmonious, in sync, in its proper place, in nature, in the cosmos. Now, as you are studying and returning to the mindset of your ancient forebearers, you are literally, while sleeping, rejuvenating, reestablishing the correct neural fiber network patterns. Over the course of time, thousands of years, when we've been reprogrammed, actual fiber network was scrambled. You could literally say that many of us have lost our minds. in that when you have established a Eurocentric way of thinking, you are no longer aligned with your proper modem of thought. In other words, studying and remembering your culture, realigning yourself, reconnecting yourself to your heritage and hereditament is religioning yourself to your ancient forebearers. And as you are studying and becoming more adept, you are literally remapping the neural fiber network of your brain. You are becoming more optimally efficient in the manner in which you think, the processing that actually goes on when you're thinking regarding any matter. It becomes more efficient. Matter of fact, as you study, over a period of time, you'll find that it feels less like you're studying and more like you're remembering. Because remembering is, in fact, reconnecting yourself with your genetic understanding. It's called genetic memory. That mental genetic memory is in our genes. That's where you hear the term genius, the genes in us. Genetically, everything that has ever been is encoded within the DNA of your melanin. And as you study and start to pull back those scales of misunderstanding and realign yourself with your proper cultural heritage and who you are, your nobility and hereditament. Genetically, you are Asiatic, not African. Africa is a landmass, not genetics. A landmass cannot be genetic. It is simply ground, soil, earth. Genetically, you are Asiatic. In school, they taught you about Asia Minor. Wonder why they never taught you about Asia Major? That's because that is relative to your lineage, to your genetic lineage. Asiatic. Asia Major is relative to North America, South America, Central America. The Americas are relative to Asia Major. That's why they never taught you about Asia Major in school. They only taught you about Asia Minor. Going back to religion, we learned that religion can be thought of as realigning oneself, religioning oneself to their culture, to their history, physiologically to the mindset of their ancient forebearers. Understanding your culture. There's an old saying that says, "Man, know thyself, and to thyself be true." But when we think of earth religions, no earth religion is inherently evil. As a matter of fact, all earth religions have a common root. If we think back to the time of Egypt, or what we call the period of the ancient mystery system, the school of the pharaohs, in Temple Luxor, or Luxor Temple, they learned of particular metaphysical teachings of a spiritual nature, of reality. Not this perceived reality, but the fundamental base reality, which is metaphysics. Ptolemy wanted entrance into the ancient mystery system, but was denied. So he began a bloodletting, cutting off heads of the priests until a particular individual by the name of Sylvester allowed him in and indoctrinated him as the first European pharaoh. But before that occurred, many of the professors, priests, wise men fled to the four corners of the world, taking along with them their particular adept understandings. Just like at any university, you have many professors with their own particular areas of knowledge. And when they left, taking that knowledge with them, that is what established the beginnings of earth religions. That's why we find a common thread, a root running of similarity through all earth religions. There are several stories that are similar, such as the story of Yeshua, the one they call Jesus, throughout all earth religions. Same is true with respect to his disciples. And it has to do with things that are relative to how would I put it, survival, dealing with agriculture, dealing with the astrological phenomenons of the stars and understanding when something should be planted, grown, and harvested, and things of that nature. These were survival skills that were taught within the ancient mystery systems using various codified messages. Getting back to Ptolemy. After Ptolemy was allowed into the ancient mystery system and named the first European pharaoh, he changed his name from Ptolemy, or adopted the name Serapis, which came from Sar and Apis. Apis relative to the bull, and Isis, and that was a combination which turned out to say Serapis or Sarapis. He created a bust of himself, a figurine, a sculpture from the chest up, that's a bust, and named it Serapis or Serapis. Later in his lineage, his great-great-great-great-great-grandson, during the time of the Nicene Council, proclaimed it to be law that Serapis, which literally means Christ Savior, or Savior the Christ. When the Nicene Council adopted the law that the image of Serapis would be used to represent Christ Savior, the name of an Aramaic revolutionist by the name of Yeshua, which they called Jesus, was then usurped to represent the image of Serapis. That's how you get Jesus, the Christ Savior, as representative of that particular image. This was done for political reasons, because Christianity, and there were many forms of Christianity, all types with all different types of meanings, but the government needed one in which the people could uniformly agree upon. So, in the Nicene Council, they established a universal Christianity, one in which all citizens could worship uniformly. And the image of Serapis used the name of the revolutionist rabbi, Aramaic, from the Davidic order or House of David, Yeshua, or as they called him, Jesus, to represent the image of Serapis. That's how the name and title, Jesus Christ Savior, came into being. Now, I've recently heard quite a few Moors going around saying that they believe that bonjour is the image that you see in the churches of Yeshua or Jesus. That's just incorrect. Bonjour was a pope. The term pope comes from the word Ptolemy, or the name Ptolemy, which, as we just learned, is the same as the image of Serapis or Serapis, which is representative or was adopted to represent that Melchizedek revolutionist, rabbi, priest from the Davidic order, the keeper of the word of God. He was a metaphysicist. Pope Bourgeois is not the image that you see in the Catholic or Christian churches. That is an image of Ptolemy or the bust of Serapis. At themoorishdirectory.com, there's a great deal more of information with a great deal more specificity regarding each of the topics we've covered. So we're going to try to wrap it up, but there's a responsibility that we have also. When we're talking about responsibility, we're talking about response ability, the ability to respond correctly regarding particular issues of importance to our community, to clean up some of the misinformation proliferating. Proclaiming your nationality does not require you to go through the temple. You can go through the Moorish Science Temple of America. However, proclaiming your nationality is proclaiming your heritage. It is respecting and giving homage to your forebearers. It's genetic. Moorish Science Temple is not a magic gateway to your nationality. Your nationality is what your forebearers were. If you cut yourself, you bleed your blood of your forebearers. You are Moorish, American, a Moroccan, American, indigenous and aboriginal to this land. It's not a club. It's not something that you sign up for. It's something that you are. It's relative to your genetics, as we explained earlier. Moors, or the Moors, are simply individuals, brown people like you or I, who have chosen to identify themselves with a greater degree of specificity as to the legal and lawful nature of their heritage, their genetic background, their bloodline, identifying themselves as indigenous and aboriginal Moorish Americans, paleo to this land, existing here since the time of dust. They have simply chosen to not exist in what they call civil liter mortuus, or to exist dead in the eyes of the law, because they know that if in fact they are identifying themselves merely as the absence of color, which is black, the absence of that photon energy, then they are stripping themselves of their human rights, and they wish not to operate underneath civil rights, which can be bestowed or taken away. That's why when a young man runs from one of the armed enforcers and are shot down, then it is a civil rights violation, not a human rights violation, because they are not viewing them as having a right to live. They are considering it a civil infraction. So again, Moors or the Moors are simply brown people like you or I, who chose to identify themselves with more legal specificity as to the nature of their heritage, their forebearers, and giving honor to their forefathers as to the nature of their bloodline. It is not a club that one joins. It is genetic in nature. In the Moor Science temples, They should be teaching the science of your spiritual self. I support the Moorish Science Temple of America, sociologically as well as economically. I understand the vital role that it plays in our community. It's important for our socialization. It's important for us to go to the temple, to fellowship with one another, to learn civics, history, more about our culture. However, there should be within the curriculum those study groups which are beginning the process of teaching true Moorish science, which is of a metaphysical spiritual basis. Studying the Circle 7 Holy Quran is critically important nourishment for our spiritual souls on a daily basis, not just during our temple gatherings. I read mine each day. True Moorish science has to do with studying self. As we mentioned earlier, the fundamental base reality is consciousness. The world you see around you is a perception. This dimension, this holograph, is perceived. Consciousness is the base fundamental reality. A physicist by the name of Einstein, during his final interview, one of the reporters, scientific reporters, asked him, "What is reality?" And he responded by saying that it is what all of the gurus, the masterminds, the sages, and wise men of all ages have always said that it was. Reality is an illusion, albeit a persistent one, end quote. He said that because Einstein had finally approached the precipice of his understanding after decades of studying physics. He began to understand and peer into the reality that he was always within the box, opposed to outside of the box. There is a subset reality, which is the physical, objective universe. And then there is a superset, which is consciousness, fundamental reality. These are the types of things that would have been taught within the Adamic ancient mystery system in Egypt, in Temple Luxor, what the pharaohs were learning. This is all part of our culture. Seek and ye shall find. That's a cosmic contract. It doesn't say seek and you may find, or you might find, or well, you could find. Seek and ye shall find is a promise. And for those that are seeking with an endearing heart, they shall find. Man, know thyself. This is just an incubator and a learning environment. It is to teach us how to lower our entropy. That's a term in physics. Entropy has to do with confusion or chaos. When entropy is high, that's chaos. Lowering one's entropy is order. Now, you heard me mention a little bit earlier the term God. Now, we know, of course, that that has a Eurocentric etymology to it. Not worth really going into much more than that. In physics, however, as well as metaphysics, one can think of it as G-O-D, good, orderly direction. As we study, recalibrating the neural factor network of our brain synapses, returning to the mindset of our ancient forebearers, we are studying self, the subjective reality, not this objective reality. That's critically important to be taught at the temples. Because when we say those phrases such as the uplifting of fallen humanity, we have to understand that that has to do with the evolution of the earth hive mind consciousness, and is not something that will be done from an objective position. The task of uplifting fallen humanity is scientific. When that mastermind, Noble Drew Ali, was naming the temple Moorish Science Temple, he purposefully put the term science in the center to remind us of the importance of that, because all sciences have methodologies. Something cannot be scientific if it does not have a methodology. That has to do with the functionality. And it's through the study of those sciences that the uplifting of fallen humanity will occur. Studying law is important. Studying history is vital. Studying our Holy Quran Circle 7 is a prerequisite. But so is studying other matters, which kind of leads me also to this subject. I have heard Moor say that you cannot be a Moor unless you are Muslim or that you study Islam. Again, being Moorish American is genetic. It's not a belief system. You have Moors who are Baha'i, Buddhist, Hindu, Asiatic, Taoism, many things. Those are belief systems. Islam. It's all important. I read my Quran of the East as well as the Quran, Circle 7, Holy Quran, Circle 7 of the Moor Science Temple. I also study the Bible because I understand that within it, especially in its esoteric meanings, not the exoteric meanings, it still holds a lot of the keys relative to the ancient mystery systems encodified within it, because in fact it came from the scribes of our elders. So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. As I stated earlier, it all comes from a common root. That doesn't mean that I'm studying the Catholicism, even though I study that academically so that I know about Catholicism, its history and its roots and how it came about, and we spoke about some of that earlier. But it's as important me reading the Bible as it is reading the Bhagavad Gita, or studying with those in my neighborhood that are of the Baha'i faith or of the Hindu faith, because it's all one root of the root, cause of the cause, one creator. So this talk about one cannot be a Moor unless they are of a particular belief, it's not even logical, because your heritage is genetic, and that has to do with your nationality as well, not your belief systems. Also, I've been receiving some calls of people talking about how they can get rid of their Social Security numbers. Well, first of all, they don't have Social Security numbers. The Social Security Administration has numbers in which they use for particular administrative purposes. When I ask the individuals that call about this matter, I ask the question, What do you say when you're going to take care of some business and they ask you for your Social Security Administration number? They tell them, or they have told me, well, I usually say I don't have one. If you're trying to take care of some business, all you need to say is possessive, okay? In the possessive manner, say, the Social Security Administration's number that has always been used for whatever purpose exclusively to identify me is 251-553-84, whatever. And take care of your business and leave. You don't need to sit there and try to educate people, take them through that learning curve. The paradigm shift is too steep. Until such time that you can appropriately and responsibly become adept enough to separate yourself from it in a manner in which you don't leave your resources in someone else's hands. The reason I say that is that many of us have worked our entire lives and have had money taken out. That's yours. When I say money, of course, I'm talking fiat, resources, economics, monetary enumerations, assets. It's yours. Don't leave that for someone else. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. I hope that everyone has enjoyed the presentation today. And of course, there's far more information with greater deal of specificity at the moorsdirectory.com. And for those who are not aware, there is a free copy of the book, The Key on True Moorish Science and Metaphysics, now available within your Moor's Guide to a Practical, More Hassle-Free Existence. That's basically like a user's manual as to how to navigate this particular system and how to operate appropriately in your proper personam. Of course, remember that there's no need to purchase packages out from any type of individuals who are trying to sell these proclamation packages. There is an easy processing PDF that you can obtain at moorsdirectory.com that provides you all of the information that you need, the templates, the examples, the addresses, everything that's needed with respect to proclaiming one's nationality, and understanding that it is your unalienable, aboriginal, and indigenous right to proclaim your pride in your genetic heritage. So, also free at the Moorish Directory, if you go to the homepage, you'll find the book called Your Right to Write, the Right Writ, Right, which took about 5 months to do, and is free for download for Mac and PC users. Well, I appreciate an opportunity of speaking with you by all means, and allowing for me to set up these 2 short clips for those looking at this particular episode, and I'm certainly hopeful that they'll benefit from it. I appreciate your time and expounding upon and providing the information that you have. Thank you very much, brother.
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity, brother.
Absolutely. All right. Well, peace and love, and I shall be back with you.
Peace.
Peace and love. Prosper.